All right, if it's Wednesday, you know it's time for Newsroom. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for choosing KTN News. This is Morning Express. In the Newsroom, we take a look at whether we've done justice as a Kenya media in terms of covering some of the top stories. And we'll just begin with the aspect of Obama's visit. Obama's fifth visit to the country, of course, this time around as a private citizen. For him, it was more personal since he came to support his half-sister, Alma Obama. Mark, what did you think of the coverage this time around on former U.S. President Barack Obama's visit to Kenya, his fifth one? Not as should I say, not as exciting as his last one back in 2015 as the first sitting U.S. president to visit Kenya?
Well, it was an interesting thing because I think there were two stories to the coverage. The first story, of course, is the media didn't have a choice. You had to cover Barack Obama. He is the former president of the United States. He's the president the Americans miss most. They're tweeting about him every day. They're saying they miss him. And two, he came at a position where he was juxtaposed with Russia and Trump having a conversation, and Trump showing the whole world the height of his hubris and foolishness. So there was that interesting juxtaposition. But on the other side, and why people think that it was a lackluster performance, I don't think it was on the part of the media. I think it was on the part of Obama himself, because he came to lend his voice to Sauti Kuu. So it was very critical that his voice does not overpower Sauti Kuu. He wanted Kenyans and the nation to know that there's this organization that his sister is doing to help the youth and things like that. So even his speech was toned down. Even his story was toned down. The number of media interviews he gave was toned down. He tried to make it as much a family visit as possible, because the balance they were trying to put there was to give emphasis to Sauti Kuu and not having the brand that is Barack Obama overcome Sauti Kuu. But that is a very difficult balancing act, and if I were them, I would not have bothered to do so. I would have made Sauti Kuu and Barack Obama the same thing. Okay, I would have made the story about that. And two, I would have started much earlier, because now people are beginning to learn about Sauti Kuu when you're busy admiring the greatness and grandeur that is Barack Obama. So it's sort of like, you know, people will understand this. It's sort of like a very handsome gentleman or a very lovely lady trying to sell you shoe polish, and you're just staring at their face. That's the communication that happened. So Kenya was so focused on the beauty of Barack Obama's visit that even the people in the village were busy asking, how come we didn't see him? How come he didn't wave at us? Instead of saying, wow, he's left us a very nice youth center, he is going to help our youth. Why? Because those voices didn't quite marry. And for Alma Obama, she's got a lot of ground to cover in terms of branding Sauti Kuu and entrenching it in the public psyche as something that is owned by the Kenyan people. So she's got a lot more to do, and her communication people need to work at that much more.
All right, Honorable Yusuf, what do you generally think of the coverage this time round of former U.S. President Barack Obama in Kenya, and the aspect that even from a Kenyan's perspective, having to talk to Kenyans over the weekend, not so many of them knew that he was around. The World Cup final also kind of clouded the whole issue. But your thoughts?
But absolutely. I think the coverage from his last visit is very different, and for good reasons, because when he came last time, he was the president of the United States. And now he's coming as an ex-president. And I think also on the part of Obama himself, he did not want a high-profile visit.
Yes.
He had come on a private visit to support a project that was initiated by his sister.
Right.
And he was here to give her a hand. And I think the idea was for him not to overshadow his sister and the work that he had come to support her. And you can see that she was standing by his side when he went to visit the president, when he went to visit our former prime minister and the leader of opposition. He was pushing his sister forward to say, I'm here for my sister. And the other thing that I noted also, he did not want it to become an over-officialized event, the protocol. So it had very little protocol, despite the fact that this was a well-planned visit, given the fact as an ex-president, he travels with his bodyguards, especially the U.S. government-provided bodyguards, and everything has to be worked out in terms of his security and his comfort. So I think to a certain extent, it was very different from his last visit. Although I would have wanted the media to focus more on what he's doing on the ground, what this organization has come to support is, who is his sister, and why is she playing this particular role. That is the kind of coverage that, that I was expecting, but to a certain extent, the media was only focused on the personality of the ex-president. And given the fact that there were many other things happening around the world at that particular time, that was grabbing our attention. And the biggest problem, in fact, with this visit was it was a very short visit. He arrived Sunday, and he went and left. He left on Monday evening, I think. It was a very short visit. So I think maybe we should be looking forward to a longer visit, where he would come with his family. You know, he hasn't visited with Michelle and his children. And to a certain extent, I think the people of Kenya would like to see his family here as well.
Right. I mean, he did promise that back in 2015, just to note that. The aspect of where a lot of Kenyans have come out to criticize that both President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga brought their daughters to work that day. Bring your child to work that day when President Barack Obama was visiting over the weekend. What were your thoughts on that? Were Kenyans just overlooking it? Have we made it so dramatic? Or was it generally just a father introducing their daughter to former US President?
Yeah, of course. You know, if you're a personality, a famous personality, a celebrity, or a key personality, there are opportunities that your family looks forward to.
Right.
And these are historical opportunities that you never come across. It doesn't happen all the time. So I think it was a good opportunity for the president and the former prime minister to be able also to introduce their families, since the fact that President Obama came with his sister anyway. So maybe show them a member of the family.
Mark, what would you say?
First, Kenyans need to stop being petty. It is not their fault that they're the president's daughter and the former prime minister's daughter. Come on, let's be serious. So should we now say that when Trump went to the States, Prince Harry should not have been there? You know, there are certain things that are a factor of life. You know, if my father can go to a country club, I can go too. I am his child. That's how it works. And Kenyans need to stop being petty. Please stop being petty. We are petty about daughters, and you're not petty about who you choose to be governor. Kenyans, wake up. You know, the reality of the matter is, what did the handshake change? When they shook hands with the president, did your economy change? Did the value of your 1,000 shillings change? No, it did not. But you're not complaining about the price of fuel. You're not complaining about the price of flour. You want to complain about Odinga's daughter meeting Barack Obama, my friend. Ask your parents maybe to have done better. You'd also have been introduced.
And speaking of, handshake, we saw Obama applauding the handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
Your thoughts on that?
You know, one of the things that this country needs to wake up to the reality of and smell the coffee as quickly as possible is the fact that the biggest danger to our country's well-being has always been our politicians and the way they polarized us in our tribal cocoons. That's always been the biggest danger and threat this country has ever faced.
Right.
That's what has led us to the brink of war in 92, 97, 2007, 2013, 2018. And Obama talked about that. And it is key for us to realize that this particular handshake has to last the test of time. Because for us to change our behavior, we need to do this kind of thing over 2-3 election cycles where we are not at each other's heads just so that someone can lead us. So the importance of the handshake cannot be overstated, because it, number one, gave us instant sigh of relief across the country. But number two, it creates an environment where you can invest long-term in this country. Because the moment you know that in 2022 we are not going to have issues, then you can invest even in a fixed deposit account, because you know your money will not devalue quickly every time there's an election. Look at your economy last year. If you look at your M-Pesa records for 2016 versus 2017, you'll realize you did better in 2016. And why did you do badly in 2017? Because no one wanted to spend. The only people who made money last year is the supermarkets, because we all ran to the supermarket to stock up so that we could have food to survive the week. Those are the only people who benefited. Everyone else was suffering. So this handshake needs to last, and for me, it needs to last and past the 8th of August, 2022. That's what needs to happen. That's when we begin to have a stable country. And that's good for the economy, that's good for our politics, that's good for our peace of mind.
Time will tell. Time will definitely tell.
True.
Let's change gears a little bit. Honorable Yusuf, earlier on when we were talking about the issue of the Kenya Power managers being arrested and how it was conducted and the aspect of CS himself being looked into in terms of investigation, CS Keter, there's something that you say that really caught my attention, and I've saved it for the newsroom, is that this specific story was probably well covered and told by Kenyans online as opposed to the newsroom. Highlight that a little bit for us.
Well, for one of the biggest outcries against KPLC, the power company, was its exorbitant and growing charges. For example, in my own household, I used to pay 20,000 shillings a month. It went to 30,000. And a month ago, I got 120,000 shilling bill.
On electricity?
On electricity.
100,000?
Yes, for a family of 5 people. So,
did you say a factory of 5 or a family of 5?
A family of 5.
I think you have a factory.
Yes,
Wow.
and there's no explanation. There's no proper customer service where you can take your case. There's complete arrogance. The next day they come and they want to cut off your power. In any case, even when I'm paying that amount of money, I don't have power for half of the week. I use converters to do some of the work that we do in the house. So this is a terribly mismanaged and a corrupt organization. And the public has been demanding action against it. And nobody was willing to listen to them. Neither the ministry responsible for it, nor the government, or any other institution. We were left to our own devices, to our own problems. And to a certain extent, this was taken up by the social media. And one particular lawyer called Paul Mboya, who became the cause célèbre, the person pushing that particular issue, both in the courts and everywhere, to the extent that now the Kenya Power and Lighting issue has become an issue, a national issue, a national problem. And I think the media, the traditional media, did not do much, in my judgment, in covering that particular story, and also covering what the social media was doing with it. I think they came late. They were not very comprehensive in its coverage. And to a certain extent, I think here, if you were to look for a winner, the social media here was the winner.
All right, Mark, as a communication strategist, this just goes to show how powerful the digital era is in this day and age, where everyone can be a journalist on their own, given you have your phone. Your voices are, Kenyans' voices are much more elaborate. But then again, would you agree with Honorable Yusuf that the media slept on this one, given the fact that we had Kenyans online pushing for this story, probably talking about it online? And as you also answer that, could you also highlight for us how poor communication is within Kenya Power? And probably you'd maybe want to highlight it, given like online in this day and age. If I have an issue with Safaricom, with my bank, I just tweet them and I get a response. With Uber. But with KPLC, their communication, my goodness. Here you have Honorable Yusuf, who is paying 100,000 electricity for 5 people. He's frustrated like any other Kenyan. He's tried to communicate with them. But even communication itself is a problem within their department.
First of all, I think Kenya Power owes Honorable Yusuf a refund. If I remember correctly, he earns less than 1 million shillings a month. He cannot be paying tithe to Kenya Power. You know what I mean? Yeah, that is wrong. But seriously, we must remember, do you remember the time the president was giving the State of the Nation?
Right.
And then some genius advised Kenya Power, not say which genius, but some genius advised Kenya Power and told them that they need to run a parallel hashtag and State of Power or something like that it was called. And that is the kind of hubris and foolishness that Kenya Power has. And the reason why Kenya Power behaves like that is because it's a monopoly. Your bank can't act like that because there are 10, 15 other banks that can compete with it. But Kenya Power, number one, acts like a monopolistic hegemony and it likes to impose its weight without due regard to its customer, because the customer does not.
But it doesn't act. It is a monopoly.
Yes.
And I think it needs to be broken down.
Exactly. So one of the things that needs to happen is, if you're going to deal with Kenya Power, number one, you must begin to think of breaking it up, perhaps county by county, and then be able to have options for guys to use and say, you know what, I don't like Kenya Power and how it's supplying me with electricity. I will work with Zinzi's company. And those are the kind of things that need to happen. But in terms of Kenya Power communication, they've come out from the beginning defending themselves versus trying to act in the best interest of the public. So they came out to explain the power bill. So if you explain that 1% of my power bill goes to Warma, it does not change the fact that I feel like I'm being overcharged. It doesn't change anything. So they've never addressed, number one, why are our bills so inflated? They did not address why in 1 month you have a bill of 2,000 shillings, then the next month it went to 10,000 shillings. They never explained why we were paying for more and getting more blackouts at the same time. So the communication mismatch is that Kenya Power has never taken its eyes off of itself to look at its customer. And by looking at itself, it is the biggest sign of corruption. Because what happens when you're corrupt, your IQ reduces as far as your work is concerned. I'll prove it to you. Because to be corrupt, you have to plan to steal. Then you have to execute the stealing. Then you have to cover up your stealing all the time.
It's a lot of work.
Yes, it covers 80% of your brain, which is why many people who are appointed to high office, they were very smart when they were managers with you. Then they become directors and their IQ sharply drops because they are spending all their time trying to hide corruption.
And the aspect of how then social media has really empowered the voices not only of Kenyans, but generally everywhere in regards to vis-a-vis traditional media.
Exactly. And you see, the truth of the matter is clicktivism is becoming the new activism. In the sense that in this country, if you want something done, you better take a picture of that corrupt police officer and post it on social media. Something will be done much, much faster than going to the police oversight authority. That's the issue. So the country as it is has really bottlenecked the opportunities for whistleblowing, the opportunities for complaining against things that are done against you. And the only opportunity that is there, which by the way is a carryover of the mob justice we had in the 90s, is social media. So today, and the danger is this about social media justice, is today we are fighting for the just. Tomorrow someone will create a fake story and we will stone people because we are so used to having a mob justice mentality. But that's because we've not seen justice being served and we do not have opportunities for getting justice done in the right way. Honorable
Yusuf?
Well, I think the reason why the traditional media has not been able to cover this story effectively and reflect the anger the deep anger that exists among the Kenyan society towards Kenya Power is the fact that Kenya Power is a monopoly. It's a big company. It's got huge resources, advertising resources. And so no newspaper can take the risk of losing that particular account.
That's true.
So the social media stepped in here very quickly. And coming back to the issue of monopoly, I think it is very clear that it is very dangerous to have monopolies. And I think particularly in the energy sector. And I think this is why Kenya should move forward to creating competitors, and to be able to expand that market.
Right.
And also to help in our manufacturing sector, because even the industries in this country are complaining that they cannot be competitive because of the high rate of electricity.
And that has been a conversation for the longest time.
Yes.
Can we have other companies come in? But then the other aspect, Mheshimiwa, is that KPLC, within the energy sectors, there's certain big dogs that wouldn't allow for other sectors, other players to come in because they know it means losing business because they know they're competent. Immediately another player comes, Kenyans will go there. But I love what you say, the aspect of where newsrooms and media houses have to choose versus running a story and sales/advertisement. Which compromises would you say then on us telling a story?
I think that is the big problem here. That is the elephant in the room that the media is not discussing. Is the fact that I know that newspapers are business ventures.
Right.
They're not philanthropic enterprises, but they must be able to balance the public interest. They must be able to take up issues of public interest at the cost of losing business in terms of advertising. You know, how long can the media carry a particular rotten organization? However much space they buy in that particular newspaper. So I think editors and media owners need to look at that. And this particular case is a lesson, is that if they don't do that, they're going to become irrelevant because people would move on to the social media to get the daily credible information that they need to sustain their lives.
Mark.
On that point, it's very critical. The Kenyan media is fixated on breaking news. We are a scoop-based media industry that if you look at the papers, everyone is looking for what's the scoop, and what is always reported is what is on the surface. For example, if you look at the story on Keter, no one has gone to research what is his story, what is he related to these people, what is the fact that he felt so emotional about them, were they his close friends, did he really believe in them? You need to begin to inculcate two kinds of journalistic principles within the Kenyan media. Number one is in-depth stories, that we need to do a deep dive into these stories, into personalities and things like that, and bring that information to the fore. The second thing that needs to happen is thought leadership in our newspapers. Sometimes take a day off and say, what next Kenya? What will Kenya look like in 20 years? What will Kenya look like in 10 years? The media has failed to paint the picture of what a Kenya would look like if Big Four fails.
Right.
We failed to paint a picture of what Kenya would look like if we fail to pay the Chinese and they take over the SGR, and now there'll be coaches for Chinese only, and then the rest of us will be riding at the back like cattle. So the reality of the matter is this: the opportunity for the media to become the thought leaders of a nation is what is missing. We've allowed the politicians and the people who keep biting the dog, as it were, to lead our newspapers, instead of us asking ourselves the question, fine, we're discussing 2022 politics, but what does it mean if we get to 2022 and we've successfully fought against corruption? What would it mean if we get to 2022 and Big Four has worked and not worked? Those are the kind of opportunities that the media is missing, and that is why we are building up a generation of Kenyans whose IQ combined will not amount to 80.
Gentlemen, let's change gears a little bit. I just want to get your comments on this other aspect where we have journalists leaving the newsroom for politics. We've seen it quite happen a lot, especially during last year with the elections. Right now, especially with, I don't want to call it a complete reshuffle. We've said it's just a mini change within the cabinet secretary. We've seen Kanzadena now becoming the acting spokesperson, rather, to the president's office. This after she already became deputy not so long ago. Congratulations to her. That was a fantastic move. But then, is someone, Honorable Yusuf, still considered a journalist when they leave the newsroom and then go fully into politics? We've seen this also with our very own former investigative reporter, Mohammed, who then left for politics.
Well, I'd say that this is it's a transition in life. People move from one profession to the other. There are no permanent professional positions. And if you look at the history of many countries, the UK, the USA, and many places, journalists have moved on to play critical roles in public service as politicians, as leaders. But more importantly, because of the expanding space of corporate communications, a lot of journalists are going into those areas now to provide the kind of expertise that they have that are needed in this new world. In the case of Kenza,
yes,
it shows that governments are now becoming responsive to public pressure, and so they need experts to be the go-between, to be the communicators, to be part of that transmission line. And to a certain extent, it shows our democracy is also maturing, because some years ago, government departments and government in general didn't give a damn about what the public thought about a government.
One would argue that when you have a journalist leave or move from a newsroom straight into politics, as opposed probably move from a newsroom and into corporate communication or PR and advertising, still within the media umbrella, when you have a journalist moving completely from the newsroom to the politics, does that compromise the situation, now given the fact that you say that this is actually a good show of a healthy democracy?
Not really, because you're moving from reporting hard facts and information to helping a government department or an institution or a private institution to project themselves better using the skills that you have. You no longer become a journalist because you're not you're not reporting facts, you're not taking sides. In this particular case, you have already moved to promote a particular company. So I don't think you would count as a journalist, just as a lawyer. We have a lot of lawyers in politics. Some of them no longer, they no longer take clients because of the positions that they have. And in some cases, if you did that, it would be a conflict of interest. But in this particular case, the journalist has moved from reporting objectively to packaging information and other communication information to make it easier for the public to understand the work of that particular government department, of that particular company. So his or her role has really changed. He or she has moved with the skills of a journalist, but they're no longer journalists.
And that aspect where, Mark, I'm coming in just a little bit, that aspect of where you have roles changing, Mheshimiwa, has also raised questions in the sense that now you have this journalist becoming a spokesvoice, as a spokesperson, the voice behind a government that you were once frustrated with and you would report on as a journalist, and to some extent now you become the member of parliament or politician who now starts to eat taxpayers' money, and you were once the one who would then voice the issue. So as much as there's a role, there's a change and there's a shift of roles, does that make journalists any better when they go into a political role, in the sense that I am here to make a positive change?
Yes, definitely. In my particular case, I moved from a journalist. I was at the BBC at a senior level. I went to the United Nations because I didn't feel satisfied.
Right.
Just reporting the humanitarian crisis, the refugee problems, the political crisis in our continent. We were going through a very particular, difficult time in Africa, a period of coups d'etats, civil wars, famines. So as a journalist, I felt I could no longer be detached from what I was covering. It was affecting me. So my satisfaction as a journalist was no longer at the peak where I was when I started. So I moved to join the United Nations, and I joined in particular the UN Agency for Refugees. I felt that by being a voice of an organization that is making a difference in the lives of people who've been displaced by conflicts, by poor governance and so on, I'll be able to make a difference. So it was a crusade, the same crusade that made me a journalist to report on issues. I was moving with my skills to an organization that was doing something, rather than just reporting about it, the United Nations.
Mark, let me get your thoughts on that. But I also want to really understand, how does this trend, how will it affect newsrooms, the trend of where we're seeing journalists leave the newsroom for politics?
First, I want to address a philosophical question a little bit. The idea really has been for a long time that the Kenyan media is antagonistic to government, and the more antagonistic you are, the more viewers you have, and that's always seemed to be the relationship. So the question is being asked from the perspective that if you've been antagonistic against government, that's executive, and politicians, and that's parliament and senate, then how then can you switch? Because these two things are like yin and yang, and they cannot mix. And that's true, has been true in the Kenyan context, in the same way the Kenyan context has always assumed that if there's corruption, the only person who can talk about it is Raila Odinga. It's the same circle of thought. But if you elevate the conversation a little bit and look at it more broadly, you realize a few things. Number one, how will it affect media relations? Number one, the reason why you pick a journalist straight out of KTN and put him or her in State House, or put him or her in Safaricom, put him or her in your private enterprise, is so that you are not just paying for advertising, but they're able to use their relationships to cover your stories in certain angles, because they understand how a newsroom works, but not only how it works, but who is in that newsroom. So for Kanze Dena, the expectation would be that since she came out of the media, she can give a call to an editor, a producer, a director, whoever, and say, listen, as a government, this is what we're trying to do. Could Could you please showcase this in your articles, in your interviews and things like that? That is how it's going to change. So there's going to be definitely a lot more collaboration between government and media houses. Now, the key questions Kenyans must ask is, what is the new role of media? That is the key question. Now, if media remains a scoop-based industry, then they're in trouble, because now State House will outscoop them, because they will have the connections and the tentacles within our media houses to make sure, A, they run the propaganda they want, and B, to make sure that stories are covered according to their angles. But if the media decides that it itself is a partner with government in doing the right thing, not in doing the wrong thing, but now the media is thinking the president has a big four agenda. How will these houses look like? I've not opened a single paper to see a sample house. How does it look like? No, media houses need to send people to Mexico, where we're borrowing some of this cheap housing technology from, and show us how it works. They also need to go to Chicago and find out how the projects failed in the 80s and 90s. So we need to be able to have journalists who then are telling Kanze, listen, I just came back from Chicago, and they've torn down all their housing projects because high-rise housing projects in the United States did not work. What are you doing as a government to mitigate against that?
Right.
So you put that media relationship to task to elevate the conversation.
Right.
If the conversation remains the same, then media houses will be outscooped over and over again, and their impact will be minimal.
That point from Mark Bichachi is a fantastic note to leave the newsroom this morning. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your contribution this morning on Newsroom. That was Mark Bichachi, a communication strategist, as well as Honorable Yusuf Hassan, Member of Parliament for Kamkunji. We're taking a quick commercial break here on Morning Express. When we come back, we'll give you a quick update of stories making headlines. And today being Wednesday, Your Health is coming up. My colleague, Michael Kitonga, is on standby. And a lot of your comments and feedback is coming on social media in regards to our Twitter poll question, where we're asking you, should CS of Energy Charles Kater step aside? I will be reading a lot of those comments when we come back, so stay with us.